What if the loudest man in the room wasn't the strongest? What if silence could command more power than words ever could? And what if you discovered that the most feared presence is the one who never needs to announce himself? A lion doesn't roar before it strikes. It watches. It waits. Then it moves with precision. The same is true of real strength. It doesn't shout for attention or threaten with emotion. It stays quiet, unreadable, focused. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Because what you can't predict, you can't control. And what you can't control, you start to fear. In this world, the most powerful man isn't the one who dominates the conversation. It's the one who sits still, speaks less, and yet holds every eye in the room without saying a word. His silence doesn't mean indifference. It means observation. It whispers, I see you. I understand, but I don't need to react. That's the kind of presence we're going to forge today, not through noise or performance, but through 6 powerful internal states rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom. Each one will transform your energy into quiet force and make the world pay attention without you having to ask for it. They expected you to lash out, to lose composure, to give them the emotional reaction they were fishing for. But instead, you gave them silence. And in that moment, the power dynamic flipped. Most people operate on instinct. They retaliate when insulted, defend when attacked, and explode when provoked. But that kind of response doesn't reflect power. It reflects manipulation. Because if someone else can choose your emotions, they already control the outcome. They own your state of mind. And when you respond the way they want, you've handed them the satisfaction of knowing they got inside. But imagine the opposite. You stay calm. You stay still. You say nothing. You let the moment pass without flinching. Suddenly, the one trying to provoke you feels unsure, exposed. They wanted drama. You gave them stillness. They wanted a battle. You offered only quiet clarity. And that's what makes them uncomfortable. Not because you said something intimidating, but because you didn't say anything at all. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to face their own instability. They expected resistance, and instead, you gave them a void. And the void always speaks the truth. Epictetus once wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When your reaction is calm, composed, and empty of anger, you're not surrendering. You're proving you've already won the fight within. I once knew a man unassuming, quiet. Nothing about him screamed authority. He wasn't physically imposing, never raised his voice, and rarely made himself the center of attention. But one day, in a packed boardroom, everything shifted. A colleague, driven by arrogance, tried to publicly humiliate him, mocking his ideas, calling him outdated in front of everyone. The room tensed, waiting for an argument. But he didn't engage. He didn't blink. He simply looked at the man and asked, "Are you finished?" Then, without another word, he turned his eyes back to the spreadsheet and continued working as if nothing had happened. Silence swept across the room. The attacker withered. That single moment rewrote the hierarchy. His silence didn't say, "I'm afraid." It said, "You don't move me. I am not here to play your game." That quiet refusal to react carried more strength than any sharp comeback ever could. The man who cannot be rattled is the one who cannot be broken. When you don't need to prove anything, when you stand unmoved by provocation, you become the kind of presence that makes everyone else uneasy. Because in a world addicted to chaos, Calm is the most unsettling force of all. There is a rare kind of presence that doesn't ask for permission to exist. It doesn't beg for attention or try to stand out through theatrics. It simply arrives calm, grounded, unshakable, and, in doing so, it shifts the energy in the entire room. Most people fill space with noise, nervous laughter, rapid speech, and constant movement. They crave validation. They cling to being noticed. But the truly powerful don't need to be noticed to feel powerful. They don't need applause to know their value. Their presence is built through years of discipline, clarity, and inner stillness. It is not a performance. It is a state of being. You can sense it immediately. They don't flinch. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't adjust their truth to make others more comfortable. They simply are. And that fact alone unsettles people. Because in a world where everyone is trying so hard, someone who doesn't try at all but still commands respect feels disruptive. When that kind of man walks into a room, people instinctively lower their voices. They pause before interrupting. They choose their words with more care. Not because he demanded it, but because his energy quietly requires it. Power, real power, doesn't come from domination. It comes from consistency, from integrity, from knowing exactly who you are and never wavering from it. I remember a man named Elias. He didn't tower over anyone. He wasn't flashy or loud. But when he walked into a meeting, the entire tone of the room shifted. He never rushed. Every step was measured. Every look was intentional. Every pause had weight. Even when silent, it felt like something meaningful had just occurred. He worked in an industry where voices were raised to prove points, where status was measured by volume. But Elias never competed with the noise. He let the others burn themselves out. Then, after the chaos, he would offer one sentence, calm, focused, precise, and the entire conversation would realign. People listened, not because he spoke often, but because his words carried clarity. There was no wasted emotion, no desperation for approval, only deliberate control. Over time, his silence became feared, not because it was cold, but because it was unreadable. People hate what they cannot anticipate. And when you don't react the way they expect, when you hold your energy instead of spilling it, you force them into uncertainty. That's what presence does. It's not about being seen, it's about being felt. And when people feel you without effort, they respect you without explanation. So how do you build this? You stop performing. You stop chasing. You breathe deeper. You ground yourself in each moment. You observe more and speak less. You learn to let silence speak louder than insecurity. You practice showing up with intention rather than impulse. Eventually, your stillness becomes so solid that it unsettles those who rely on reaction. A man who is rooted in purpose doesn't rush. He doesn't scramble to be heard. He walks with such clarity that others slow down around him, trying to match his rhythm. And when that happens, when the world begins to shift around your calm, instead of you shifting to match its chaos, you no longer need to demand power. You simply are power. There's a reason people insult you, and it's not always because they despise you. Sometimes it's because they fear you. They fear the confidence you carry. They fear the calm that makes them feel exposed. They fear how you refuse to play their emotional games. And so, they try to break you down, not with fists, but with words. They throw sarcasm and veiled jabs, hoping to pull you into their drama. Because insults aren't always rooted in truth. They're tools of disruption. When someone sees strength they can't match, they try to shake it. They want to know they can get to you. They want to believe they still have control. The moment you respond in anger, the moment you raise your voice or try to defend yourself, they've succeeded. Because now your peace is gone, and that was the target all along. They didn't want to win a debate. They wanted to hijack your center. And once you hand them that access, no clever comeback or sharp retort can undo it. But when you remain silent, when you don't flinch, don't respond, don't even acknowledge their attempt, it doesn't mean they've hurt you. It means they've failed to move you. And nothing frustrates a provocateur more than being ignored. Silence becomes your verdict. It's not weakness. It's a message. You're not worth a reaction. And in many ways, that is more cutting than any insult you could return. I remember a woman named Clara who worked in a company that thrived on gossip and passive aggression. She had a coworker jealous, insecure, constantly trying to undermine her. The attacks were subtle at first. Backhanded compliments, dismissive jokes, exaggerated criticism. Clara never reacted. She kept her focus, did her work, and walked out of each room with grace. Over time, the attacks escalated. The louder the other woman got, the quieter Clara remained. People began to notice. The energy shifted. Eventually, no one laughed at the jokes. The insults started to sound desperate. And Clara never had to defend herself. Her stillness made her enemy unravel. Because when you keep pushing against someone who refuses to push back, you start to look ridiculous. That's the power of unshaken dignity. You become a mirror to your attacker. They wanted chaos. You gave them poise. They wanted fire. You gave them cold clarity. And in doing so, you let them destroy themselves. Epictetus said, if someone speaks ill of you, instead of defending yourself, say, clearly he doesn't know me well. It's not arrogance. It's self-possession. When you know who you are, you don't explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't lower yourself to match their chaos. You don't hand over your peace like it's something disposable. You let your silence do the speaking. You let your calm expose the weakness in their noise. Because the person who refuses to explain or justify is either broken or far beyond the battle. Be the one who rises. Be the one who holds ground. And the next time someone throws words like daggers, don't fight. Don't retreat. Just smile, and not because it didn't hurt, but because it never touched the part of you that matters. People don't admit it out loud, but they fear what they can't predict. The moment you become unreadable, you become a threat. Because control begins with understanding, and if someone can't understand your patterns, your reactions, or your weaknesses, they can't manipulate you. Most people reveal too much, too soon. They speak before thinking, they share emotions freely, they explain their goals and reveal their insecurities, all without realizing they're handing over ammunition. The more you talk, the more they learn about how to move you, how to trigger you, how to control your direction. But when you hold back, when you move in silence, when your decisions aren't announced or explained, you become a mystery. And mystery is intimidating. It doesn't mean you're hiding, it means you're protecting. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't broadcast their emotions or their plans. They didn't need validation. They chose silence, not as retreat, but as armor. Seneca once said, "It is a great thing to know when to speak and when to be silent. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's defense." It's how you stay one step ahead in a world that's always trying to read you, map you, and find a way in. I once met a man named Caleb. He wasn't flashy, loud, or eager to be known. He was soft-spoken, always composed, and careful with his words. When people asked personal questions, he'd smile gently, offer a vague reply, then shift the focus without ever seeming evasive. He wasn't hiding, he was protecting. Some people called him mysterious. Others said he was arrogant. But over time, something became clear: people respected him. Why? Because they couldn't read him. They didn't know what made him angry. They didn't know what he feared or what he truly wanted. That made them uneasy. When pressure hit, when conflict erupted, Caleb was the one who stayed grounded. Because no one had access to his internal levers. No one had the blueprint to shake his foundation. In meetings, while others revealed too much frustrations, insecurities, opinions, Caleb remained deliberate. And in doing so, he remained untouchable. People feared what he might do next. Not because he was unpredictable in behavior, but because they had no insight into what he was capable of. That's the power of restraint. When you stop oversharing, when you stop narrating every thought, when you let people wonder instead of telling them everything, you gain control. Not through force, but through silence. The man who doesn't give access is the man no one can manipulate. That kind of quiet discipline isn't weakness. It's preserved power. And that power only grows stronger when it moves intentionally and reveals only what the moment demands. In a world addicted to noise, where everyone's broadcasting their every thought, plan, and dream, there's something profoundly unsettling about a person who doesn't speak much but acts with impact. We live in a culture obsessed with sharing. People post about their goals before they start, announce projects before they're real, and chase attention like it's the accomplishment itself. But the truth is, the more you talk, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the easier it is for others to anticipate your moves and block your progress. The one who talks constantly is easy to read, easy to disarm, but the one who works silently, who keeps his intentions close and his focus sharp, becomes a force that no one sees coming. He's not hiding, he's simply refusing to perform. Because when you move without noise, you remove the resistance that noise invites. And by the time anyone notices what you're doing, you're already too far ahead to be stopped. The Stoics lived by this principle. They didn't care about image. They didn't seek approval. They acted in silence, guided by inner discipline. They understood that greatness doesn't require an audience. It only requires consistency. As Epictetus wisely said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Let others explain. Let them pitch and promote. You, on the other hand, live it. I once knew a woman named Samira. She didn't make waves. She didn't hype her ideas. While her coworkers competed for attention, boasting about plans and networking for visibility, Samira kept her head down and quietly delivered results. At first, she was overlooked, underestimated, even dismissed. But when the company faced a critical crisis, it was Samira's system, the one no one knew she'd been building, that saved them millions. Suddenly, she wasn't invisible anymore. She was invaluable. And before anyone could process it, she was already moving on, promoted, elevated, irreplaceable. That's the power of silent execution. It doesn't seek permission. It doesn't give warnings. It just arrives and shifts everything. If you want to be feared, not for what you say, but for what you might do next, then stop announcing. Stop narrating. Let your actions become the only voice that matters. Because when people can't predict you, they start to fear the potential you hold. And that fear, the kind that comes from mystery, from discipline, from restraint, echoes louder than any words ever could. It doesn't shout, it lingers, it builds tension. It leaves others wondering what you're capable of. And in that silence, in that space where nothing is explained but everything is felt, you create a presence that can't be ignored. There's something profoundly unsettling about a person who has no need for external approval. In a world where attention has become currency and validation is served in the form of likes, applause, and empty praise, most people learn to adapt, softening their edges, adjusting their tone, and disguising their truth just to stay likable. They laugh even when they don't find something funny. They nod when they disagree. They suppress their convictions to avoid standing out. They dilute their essence to be accepted. And that's exactly why someone who doesn't do any of that stands out so powerfully. Not because they're aggressive or defiant, but because they walk through the world as they are, unfiltered, unpolished, unapologetic. Their presence alone confronts those who've compromised too much. It stirs something uncomfortable, a quiet pressure that says, this is what it looks like to be free. Authenticity becomes threatening when it reveals how much others have abandoned their own. I once knew a man named Jace. He wasn't flashy. He didn't chase status or bend to fit into social circles. He spoke clearly, but never tailored his voice to win people over. He didn't gossip. He didn't flatter. He just existed with quiet clarity and unwavering presence. And that presence made people nervous. They whispered things like, he's intense, or he's too serious. But the truth was, Jace made them confront their own performance. They sensed, perhaps subconsciously, that he wasn't playing the same game. He wasn't adjusting for acceptance. He was just being. And in that stillness, in that self-contained energy, others felt their own masks shift. That's the paradox of real authenticity. It doesn't demand anything from you, yet it changes everything around you. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed in living aligned with one's nature, not according to trends, approval, or the expectations of the crowd. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's not just advice, it's liberation. It means you don't need to convince anyone of who you are. You don't need to explain your choices to people who don't live your life. You don't have to adjust your truth just to be more digestible. You simply live it. Want to build that kind of energy? Then stop apologizing for being too direct, too deep, too focused, too quiet. Stop shrinking your thoughts so they fit in someone else's comfort zone. Say what you mean what you say, and say less of it. Don't laugh to smooth tension. Don't pretend you're fine just to avoid discomfort. Hold your ground. Honor your values. Speak your truth even if your voice trembles. Because when you finally show up without filtering, when you stop bending to match the room and instead bring your full self into it, you don't just walk with peace, you carry a different kind of weight. The silent kind. The kind that makes weaker men straighten their posture and adjust their words before you even speak. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't demand attention. You didn't need to explain yourself to anyone. Yet, they paused. They hesitated. They felt the weight of your presence not because you spoke, but because you didn't have to. While others scrambled for validation, for applause, for reaction, you stood still. You became a question they couldn't answer, a force they couldn't predict. And in that silence, they began to fear what you might do next. That's the kind of energy that reshapes a room. You didn't need chaos. You didn't need drama. You simply embodied stillness with such intensity that it became the loudest thing in the room. You didn't chase power. You became it. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you were before the noise told you to perform. Before the world taught you to shrink, adapt, and explain. Now, you move differently not to be seen, but because you no longer seek to be understood. If something in you shifted while watching this, if you feel ready to step into that silent foresee, drop a comment. I no longer explain. I just move. And subscribe, or not because we asked, but because you know you're not meant to be average. Welcome to the world of still power. For more timeless wisdom and practical strength, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and dive into our Stoic Wisdom playlist. It's your space to grow, to reflect, and to keep walking forward with clarity. Until next time, stay calm, stay strong, and keep walking the Stoic path.